Right now, under the Amazon rainforest, there are cities. Not ruins of huts. Cities, linked by raised roads that run straight for miles across flooded plains. Fed by canals and reservoirs that controlled where the water went. Anchored by earthen mounds taller than a four-story building. Surrounded by farmland built on soil these people engineered by hand. This was not a scattered tribe surviving in the trees. This was a society of hundreds of thousands of people. And then it was gone. The jungle grew over the roads, swallowed the mounds, and buried the canals under 1,000 years of green. For centuries, we were told the Amazon was untouched wilderness, pristine, empty, a place humans had barely scratched. That story was wrong. And the proof had been sitting under the canopy the entire time, waiting for a machine that could see through trees. Let's start with the soil, because the soil is the strangest part. Most of the Amazon is terrible for farming. The rain washes the nutrients straight out of the ground, leaving thin, sour, reddish dirt. You cannot feed a city on it, but scattered across the basin are patches of earth that are black, deep, and impossibly rich. Locals call it Terra preta, dark earth. It is not natural. People made it deliberately by mixing the soil with charcoal, broken pottery, bones, and food waste over generations. The result holds nutrients instead of losing them, and it stays fertile for centuries. Some of these black earth patches are over 2,000 years old and are still more productive than the ground around them today. You do not invent a soil technology like that to feed a few families. You invent it to feed a population that refuses to leave, which raises the obvious question, where did all those people live? For a long time, the honest answer was that we couldn't see anything. The forest is too thick, the ground is too overgrown, and the structures were made of earth, not stone. Earth mounds covered in trees look like hills. Earth roads covered in trees look like nothing at all. Then came LIDAR. LIDAR fires laser pulses down from an aircraft, millions of them, and measures how long each one takes to bounce back. Most of them hit leaves and branches, but a few slip through the gaps and reach the actual ground. Strip away every pulse that hit a tree, and what's left is a bare map of the surface, as if you deleted the entire rainforest. And when researchers did that over the Llanos de Mojos in Bolivia, the ground underneath was covered in geometry. Straight lines, right angles, ringed enclosures, raised platforms. This was the heartland of what we now call the Casarabe culture. They built dense settlements connected by causeways, some running for miles in dead straight lines through swamp that floods half the year. At the centers stood massive earthen platforms and conical mounds, deliberately raised, deliberately arranged. Around them, canals moved water and reservoirs stored it. This was urban planning in the Amazon, more than 1,000 years ago. And the Casarabe were not alone. Across the western Amazon, when the forest was cleared for cattle in recent decades, something else emerged from the bare ground. Geoglyphs. Enormous geometric ditches carved into the earth. Perfect squares, circles, and rings hundreds of feet across. There are hundreds of them, spread over an area the size of a small country. Many were dug in places that were grassland back then, not dense jungle. Another crack in the pristine forest story. Because these people weren't living inside an untouched wilderness. They were shaping it. They cleared it, planted it, drained it, and reshaped the land to serve them. Parts of the Amazon we think of as wild are actually overgrown gardens. Orchards of useful trees, planted so long ago we mistook them for nature. So picture the real scene now. Not a few hunters in the trees, towns linked by roads, surrounded by black earth fields, ringed by canals, feeding crowds of people who had lived in the same place for 1,000 years. That is the civilization we erased from the story. Which brings us to the harder question. What happened to them? Because somewhere between their peak and the modern day, all of it stopped. The roads went quiet, the fields went fallow, and the forest moved back in. There are a few theories, and the early ones leaned on the environment. Maybe a long drought broke the water systems that everything depended on. Maybe the population grew faster than even the dark earth could feed. Maybe internal conflict pulled the settlements apart from the inside. These almost certainly played a role in some places at some times, but they don't explain the scale or the timing of the collapse. Because the real catastrophe didn't come from the sky or the soil. It came from across an ocean, carried in the blood of people who had never set foot in the Amazon. When Europeans reached the Americas, they brought diseases the New World had never encountered: smallpox, measles, influenza. People here had no immunity to any of them, none at all. And these diseases did not wait for the Europeans to arrive in person. They traveled along the same trade routes and rivers the locals used every day. A sickness could leap from village to village far faster than any explorer could paddle upstream, so the plagues raced ahead into the deep interior, into places no European would see for another 100 years. By the time anyone with a pen and a journal actually reached those cities, the cities were already empty. The dying happened in the dark, unrecorded, ahead of the people who would later claim they'd discovered an empty land. In some regions, the death toll may have reached as high as 90%. Think about what that means for a society. You don't just lose people. You lose the farmers who knew how to maintain the dark earth. You lose the engineers who knew how to keep the canals flowing. You lose the memory, the planning, the workforce that held a city together. A few survivors can't run a civilization built for hundreds of thousands. So they scattered, and they returned to a smaller, simpler way of living. And without anyone to maintain it, the earthworks did what Earth does. The roads softened. The fields flooded. The mounds sprouted trees. Within a few generations, the jungle had stitched itself back over everything. By the time outsiders arrived and looked around, they saw exactly what they expected to see: endless, untouched forest. They never imagined they were standing on top of a graveyard of cities. And here's the part that should genuinely unsettle you. These people were not primitive. They were not less clever, less capable, or less ambitious than anyone else on Earth. They solved problems: soil, water, scale, that would challenge engineers today. They built something that lasted 1,000 years, and it was erased so completely that we spent 5 centuries believing it had never existed at all. We are not finding these cities because we got smarter. We are finding them because a laser can finally see what the forest hid. There are almost certainly more out there, still under the canopy, still unmapped. Whole worlds of people reduced to faint geometry under the trees. That is the eerie truth at the center of all this. An entire civilization, its roads, its farms, its hundreds of thousands of lives, can vanish so fast that the next people to walk the same ground don't even know it was there. Not over thousands of years, within a few generations. The forest didn't hide them because they were small. It hid them because there was no one left to remember.